Thank you everybody for coming out today. I just want to start with sharing why we're here. And again, we have members of the Michigan House Freedom Caucus as well as the Honorable Representative Josh Schriver with us. But why are we here in my office is where I want to start. We have the Republican press conference room, which we put the media advisory out for, that we were going to be meeting down there. I got a call at about 4:30 in the afternoon yesterday that wasn't going to be allowed to happen. The reason why is because Central staff, I got a call from Lindsey Young, Central staff is concerned that they may possibly lose their jobs based on the nature of this resolution, going for a censorship of the Speaker of the House. Because the Central staff, although they work for the Republican caucus and they work under Republican leadership, they work at the pleasure of the Speaker of the House, which in this circumstance is a Democrat. And there was fear that their staff could be fired if we had the meeting in there. This is the type of fear that staff have to live under often here in Michigan. This is a reoccurring theme. It's an honor to have brave staff who are working in my office. That was actually a consideration before I hired Nick in my office. There was actually something I was working on that was controversial. I said, I just want to let you know, as you're thinking about this job change, like, they may not allow you to work in my office because of what I'm doing. Nothing to do with you, but because of what I'm doing. So this type of intimidation and leverage over staff members is inexcusable here in the House. That needs to change. And how does that happen? Well, we vote on the House rules and we vote on the Speaker of the House the first thing every term. Typically, we vote on the House rules first. This last year, for the first time, we voted on the Speaker of the House first by roll call vote, and then we did the House rules by voice vote. All those in favor say aye, all those opposed say nay, boom, the motion carries. That's how we adopt the House rules that give so much power to the Speaker of the House. And actually, Representative Schriver and myself were stifled from speech on the House floor. We wanted to bring forward motions and adjustments as we were working through the House rules process. And because we voted on the Speaker first, he ignored us as we tried to make those points about how much power he has over the legislature, over the legislative process, over the legislators, and over their staff. So, why are we here from the purposes of this resolution? Last year, House Bill 4437 was passed. It was the budget bill for this current fiscal year. And in House Bill 4437, there was a section 1017, as well as other parts in the bill, where it has discrimination based on ethnicity. A $10 million grant program, which in order to qualify for, you have to be a minority small business owner. Based on your ethnicity determines whether or not you can qualify. Now, I thought we had learned as a society that things so abhorrent as saying that a drinking fountain can only be used by certain people based on the color of their skin is reprehensible. But yet here in our budget process, we have $250,000, a $500,000 grant program, a handout to certain specific small business owners based on the qualification of the color of their skin. Yet fast forward to February of this year, and Representative Schriver made a tweet. Was it a controversial tweet? Sure. But it was simply a tweet he shared. And they called him racist over it. Representative Schriver is a good man. He's not a racist. And the firestorm that ensued, disparaging Representative Schriver, was absolutely inappropriate and inexcusable. Meanwhile, 61 legislators voted in support of a bill that discriminated based on race. The leader of this chamber, the House, is the Speaker of the House. We have the power of the purse. And Speaker Tate should have, as the leader, not brought forward a budget bill that had racism in it. He did. Whether he heard our public outcries about the racism in the budget or not, it shouldn't take our outcries for him to know to do the right thing. However, it was a 385-page bill. And perhaps it was a simple oversight. Maybe he doesn't actually support racism. And if he wants to come forward and tell the people of Michigan, hey, this was a simple oversight. There was a lot going on. So many people who were coming to me, talking to me, things they wanted in the budget, things they didn't want in the budget. He had a lot on his mind. He absolutely did. Maybe it was a mistake. All he needs to do is apologize to the people of Michigan and assure them that it's not going to happen again.
Right.
So couple weeks ago, my staff emailed on a Thursday seeking a meeting for me to sit down with the speaker to have a conversation about this topic and about assuring the people of Michigan there wouldn't be racism in the next budget. And by Tuesday morning, we had gotten no response. We still have gotten no response. So Tuesday morning, starting a little before 8 a.m., I did you could call it a sit-in, but I was standing and live streaming the whole time. And just trying to give the Speaker of the House the opportunity to let the people of Michigan know, hey, it was an oversight. I apologize for the oversight. It's not going to happen again.
Right.
It's all he needed to do. But he dismissed me. I saw him on several occasions. The first couple times, he just walked directly. He walked from a different door because there's about 5 doors to the Speaker's office. And so he was using a different door, didn't see me. And then eventually, we got to a point where I went down by where his door was, and he got there in the morning, and I said, Mr. Speaker, do you have a moment to speak? And he said, I'll see you at session, Representative. And so I kind of gave him a look like, well, what does see you at session mean? Does that mean you'll see me across the way, or you're going to come over and talk to me? He said, have a good day. And he walked in and closed his door. Well, at session, maybe he saw me from across the way, but he didn't come over to speak to me. And right after we finished voting, and right as we were going at ease, I looked over because he hadn't come to approach me yet. So I went to seek out and find the speaker to have an opportunity to talk with him there. But he was nowhere to be found. I asked a couple of my colleagues sitting nearby. Representative Frisky is one of them. I asked another representative who sits right nearby me, and we couldn't see Speaker Tate anywhere. So I went back outside after we adjourned and waited outside his office again. Continued to get dismissal from the speaker. He's not letting the people of Michigan know where he stands on this issue. And he has not yet given assurance to the people of Michigan that there will not be racism in the budget moving forward. So that's why I'm here today, calling on the Speaker of the House to apologize. Perhaps it was a simple oversight that happened in the budget. Just assure the people of Michigan that if you're going to use your voice to denounce racism like you saw in House Resolution 191, that your formal actions as a legislator are going to follow suit, that you will not be voting in support of racism in our budgets. That's what we need from leadership. Not hollow words denouncing racism on Valentine's Day, but formal actions that do not discriminate based on the color of people's skin. And that's why I'm bringing forward a resolution to censure Speaker Tate, because he has not addressed this issue. And so by this point, I feel like we have to take him for his word in his formal vote that he supports a racially discriminating budget, like we saw in House Bill 4437. He has not let the people of Michigan know that this is not going to happen again. We're working through the budget process right now, and the people of Michigan deserve a budget that is not racist. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
I can start. I guess I'm curious, resolutions of this nature, especially when brought up by Republicans, we've seen in the past couple months, a lot of them get referred to committee, and, what is your intent, and what are you hoping to see, by bringing this up? What I know that.
And who are you with?
I'm with MERS, sorry.
Thanks.
I guess I'm curious about more information as to what exactly you're, hoping to accomplish.
Well, I think the people of Michigan deserve to know that there's not going to be discrimination based on race in the budget moving forward. And if that's something that the speaker cannot assure the people of Michigan, then this is a resolution that I think deserves serious deliberation. If we're going to take the time to denounce racism in House Resolution 191 just a couple weeks ago, then our actions as legislators, like we saw from 61 legislators who voted in support of House Bill 4437 that had Section 1017 in it, that discriminated based on the color of skin for whether or not you could get a grant as a small business owner. We need to have a process that our actions match our words. If we're going to denounce racism, because racism is abhorrent, it is, then we should also denounce it with our actions.
What sort of statement do you think it makes if this resolution is referred to committee and isn't taken up?
Well, I think what we've seen is continual dismissal of the issue. I think the statement that is being made is that they like to create a smoke and mirror system to make it look like a strong, principled conservative is the problem, when in reality the racism we're seeing in the state of Michigan is actually coming from the Democrats. So they try to flip the script and make it look like we're the ones who the people of Michigan should have an issue with. And I believe that there are hundreds of thousands of people in Michigan who, over the course of the last month or two, got a bitter taste in their mouth about strong conservatives off of a smoke and mirror scheme that disparaged Representative Schriver erroneously, when in reality, they should have a bitter taste in their mouth about what the Democrats voted for in this budget.
Anna Nichols with Michigan Advance. Exactly what public comments did you make last year during the budget about racism?
I made several posts on social media, and I also talked privately with colleagues about opposition to that. Coincidentally, there's so many bills that I've had great concern with that passed last year, that like the $1.7 billion for the electric vehicle battery plant, the hate crime legislation, where people are going to have to be afraid of getting up to 5 years in prison just for genuinely advocating to a loved one why they should not mutilate a part of their body. And so like these were the types of bills that just constantly were coming our way, these extremist bills that were coming our way. And so I've made several public statements. I can provide those with you if you'd like to see some of those live streams as well as text form.
Meyer, CBS Detroit. I'm just curious what sort of support you have for this.
Well, there's support from, I believe, beyond just the Freedom Caucus and Representative Schriver. I do know and imagine that if, say, for example, this were to come up for a vote, I would have colleagues who would say, hey, I agree with this resolution, like this makes a lot of sense, but I want to get a bill across the finish line sometime, and the Speaker of the House has so much power, I might lose my staff, I might never be able to get a bill across the finish line again. He can dominate over me and my staff with so much leverage and power that I don't want to vote in support of that resolution. And that's what is one of the horrible things about, this isn't just a Speaker Tate issue, this is a state of Michigan issue. This is a Speaker of the House issue. This is a representation of our district's issue. Because how can we properly represent the voices from our community when there's an individual who has so much power over us and our staff that people are afraid to do the right thing out of fear of repercussions? And just like we saw this morning, we tried to do the press conference in the Republican conference room, and we were notified that there was fear that Central staff would be fired if they were involved in this process. So I got that message just a half hour before the close of business yesterday, and thank you all for showing up here and doing this in my office here. We had to find a last minute option to change the location, and I appreciate your flexibility. Yes,
I'm sorry if this was asked before, but why just target Speaker Tate and not the appropriations co-chairs?
Well, I think all 61 legislators, for example, should address this issue. Do they support racism in the budget? All 61 of those denounced racism in House Resolution 191. So it seems like all of those legislators would support not having formal actions that support racism. And if they want to speak to the people in their community about where they stand in the issue, that's between them and the districts they represent. But the Speaker of the House is the one who is the leader for our chamber, and we have the power of the purse. We get to decide as the House body what goes into the budget. And so as the leader, I think it's incumbent upon him to come forward as the leader and assure the people of Michigan that racism has no home, not just with voices, but also with our actions as legislators, as we saw from 61 of them in the current budget.
I have one other question, just 'cause there's a lot of, talk of racism in the Capitol. What is this group's definition of racism?
I think that discriminating against people based on the color of their skin, or you can have words that could be racist, but you can also have actions that can be racist. If we're going to treat certain people a certain way based on the color of their skin, whether that's how we talk about them, whether or not they're allowed to use a drinking fountain, or whether or not they're able to qualify for a $500,000 grant program that other small business owners aren't able to receive. And that's what we saw in section 1017 of the budget, a $10 million grant program for minority small business owners. In order to qualify, you have to have the correct ethnicity. I can't think of what would be more racist than that.
I just want to clarify something you said earlier. You mentioned Central staff was concerned about losing a job for letting you use the Republican studio. Was that Central staff like nonpartisan or Republican caucus staff
So-
specifically?
So the place we're gonna do, the venue is the Republican press conference room, so that would be Republican central staff, but all of the staff work at the pleasure of the Speaker of the House, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And I do want to just clarify that it was Lindsay Young. We had a good conversation with her at 4:30 yesterday on this. And she was afraid that central staff may lose their jobs if they participated in this. So it was more Lindsay's concern, understandably, because we've seen some of the other things that they've done. They've blocked me from having staff, they've blocked others from having staff, they've fired other people's staff. And so this is a reoccurring theme that leadership has so much leverage over us legislators and our staff. And do I think that they would have feared that they could lose their own job? I do think that, but I just want to be clear that it was Lindsay who was afraid that central staff could lose their job.
Representative, one more question for me over here. I'm just curious what you say to the idea that these grants are meant to create are meant to correct a historic imbalance.
I think that free markets and equal opportunity and treating people properly regardless of the color of their skin is the correct way to treat people moving forward. Because of somebody being treated wrongfully or their relative being treated wrongfully 100 years ago is no reason to try to do this type of process moving forward. People deserve the dignity and respect of being treated as equals regardless of the color of their skin.
You say 100 years ago, being able to deny someone access to your business was like a 50 years ago issue. Do you believe enough time has gone by?
You know, racism should have never happened back then, and it shouldn't happen today.
Right.
And racism was on life support until it was revived by the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement. Now, whether you want to say it was President Barack Hussein Obama or you want to say that it was the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement, we had a good trajectory as a society of eradicating racism from our society until President Barack Obama and the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement came into the picture.
What sort of response have you received from your district? I know that this resolution is, still pretty fresh, but, looking at some of your action last week, you called it a sit-in, but.
Overwhelming support from my district. I haven't heard a single person from my district who is opposed to what I did. I have heard many who, some when they saw me, some reached out to me just to tell me thank you for what you're doing. So I've heard over a dozen, probably 24 people from my district who've been in support and 0 who are opposed. This is the type of thing that we need, is people who are going to fight to save our state and country as it's being destroyed by the radical left. We can't just sit back and be passive and timid and complicit as they destroy our country.
Intimidated.
Question for Rep. Schriver, if you can answer. Did Speaker Tate or the governor attempt to speak with you, try to understand your position before your staff was taken?
My constituents in my office have been silenced by Speaker Tate, who is placing illegal immigration ahead of democracy and the right for my constituents to be represented by me.
They stripped you of your committee assignment, they stripped Representative Schriver's, they handcuffed his staff. He had to work outside of your office still, is he still out in that press conference room? And, reduced his office allotment. So he's been disparaged and handcuffed as a legislator off of something he shared on Twitter, which was not racist. It was just a simply controversial thing that was shared. But it's the type of conversations that we should be talking about. And meanwhile, they voted in support of racism with their support of the budget last year. They're not being stripped of committees. In theory, because it's beyond hypocrisy, every single one of the Democrats should lose their committees who voted in support of that budget. All 61.
Black and white.
By their thoughts and perspectives, we just had House Resolution 191 to denounce racism. If this is something the state of Michigan cares about not having in our government, which it is, something that they should care, it's something that people of Michigan should care about, then by their formal action in support of a racist budget, in theory, if they were going to reprimand Representative Schriver erroneously, they should be reprimanding themselves.
What do you think the consequences would have been if that read differently?
If
Mine-
That provision read differently?
Minority to
Oh, so if section 1017 were to say, for example, that there was this $10 million grant program for white-owned small businesses, in order to qualify, you have to be a white person. Can you imagine the firestorm that would create throughout the state, nation, and international headlines that would get for how racist and abhorrent that is? Meanwhile, we just changed that one word white to minority. Is racism okay just as long as it goes in the correct direction? Or should we treat people with dignity and respect regardless of the color of their skin?
Rep. Schriver, Anna Nichols. On February 20th, right in front of like the press corps, you handed Speaker Tate some papers. We were just wondering what was in the papers, if you guys had a pleasant back and forth, or what was discussed in that, if you remember.
My constituents and my office are being silenced by Speaker Tate, who is placing illegal immigration ahead of democracy and the right for my constituents to be represented by me.
Did you write that down? Is that what you handed to him?
My office and my constituents are being silenced by Speaker Tate, who is placing illegal immigration ahead of democracy and the ability for my residents to be represented by me.
You have declined to comment.
Do we have any other questions? Yes.
How soon do you want to bring this forward to the floor? Or?
I plan to introduce the resolution today, so it'll be in the very near future. And what happens with it, we'll see what the speaker has to say for himself. If he wants to come forward and apologize for the racism, if he wants to assure the people of Michigan that there won't be racism in the next budget, or if he wants to continue to be silent, dismiss this issue. And if he does that, I think he'll be speaking volumes of where he stands on this issue.